Great. Thank you so much. Thank you to Summer Sessions, Michelle and her staff for having me over here, inviting me to talk about my new works and my new portraits with a vintage touch. So we're going to take a little journey today. We're going to start in Fairbanks and we're going to travel a little bit to Europe, and then we're going to come back to Fairbanks and feature what I've been doing recently. So great, it works. Thank you so much. So portraits is something that I've always been interested in as a photographer, as an artist. And somebody asked me this today about why portraits. And I love all sorts of photography. I love landscapes. I love street work. But the one thing that makes me so interested in photography are people. I am interested in people, their stories, their voices, their backgrounds. And I'm interested in photographing them. I'm interested in how they interact with their environment. I'm interested in how they use their environment, and ultimately, as a photographer, I'm interested in their stories and what they have to bring to the picture. That really captivates me as a photographer, is the story, the person or the people behind those images. And I hope that my pictures tell their stories, and I try to do that as I photograph. But these works are what I've been doing for the past 6 years as the former chief photographer here for UAF. And now I want to move towards some other works that I've done in my career as a photographer. And I took this picture, let's see, about 10 years ago. And it still looks like this. This is Rick, of course, at Alaska Photographic Repair in downtown Fairbanks. And if you don't know Rick, if you have a camera, if it's broken, he is a great resource in town. And he will fix your camera, he will fix your digital or analog camera, and he does wonders. So I took this portrait about 10 years ago when I was taking my photojournalism class, and it was an assignment on environmental portraiture. And I think it captures Rick tremendously. And here's another body of work that I did. This is the second installment of a series that I did of veterans on campus. And the first one I photographed was with a black background in a similar way, printed in a grid to celebrate and honor our veterans. And here's a recent portrait of my sister, Isa. And she is in town with me. She and I live together, and she is a very, very strong woman that I love and I admire, and she is awesome. So now begins my journey as a photographer. Most of the pictures you've just seen were digital pictures, with the exception to my sister. It's film. And so this next body of work was taken with this camera. It's a large format camera. I was very interested in how to use this type of camera, this machine, this box. It's made out of wood, leather, brass, glass, and glass. I was interested in how to use it and how to excuse me, how to use it. And so I thought of a series of using portraits. Excuse me. Oops. And this was my very first ever picture using this camera. As you can tell, it's all analog, not digital. It was using film, 8x10 sheets of film. This film is not in a roll. It's one, excuse me, one sheet of film that's 8x10, and it took me about 2 hours to make. Luckily, Nikki, my friend here, was 2 hours late, and I had time to set up my picture, double check everything, and I took one picture that day. And this is the very first ever photograph I took with this camera, or this type of camera. And I was very lucky. I was lucky because everything worked. Everything fell into place, and it was amazing as I developed it, turned the lights on after fixing the image, and this photograph of Nikki, who is a violinist, a gifted violinist, at the library, came out. It shouldn't have come out, because there are so many variables that one can make a mistake on. And so this series was photographing people around Fairbanks doing environmental portraits with a large format camera. I wanted to push the boundaries because this camera is very heavy. It's not so compact and not so mobile, but what I really enjoyed was the time I got to know my subjects. This is a portrait of swimmers at Pioneer Park Bridge. A teacher with her daughter, Sister Josephine. Karsten at Midnight Sunrun. When I was photographing this, I used a wagon to carry the camera because I wanted to find my picture, and I didn't have a backpack then, so I put my camera on a wagon, a red Flyer wagon. And Virgil at the farmer's market. Mr. Doudna, who used to make sleds. So these portraits are very formal in a way that formal, they're very still. They're not moving. And the reason why they're not moving is because of the medium, the camera. With this camera, people can't move front or back because then distance is what creates the focus. So if you were to sit in front of me and I take your portrait with this camera, if you move forward ever so slightly, you'd be out of focus, or if you move backwards, you'd be out of focus. So one has to sit still for this camera. And this is one reason why most of these portraits are very, very formal. Amanda at the Filipino store in Aurora Street. Bennett, my friend, who's a falconer, holding Arden, the red-tailed hawk. And I had another picture there, but it disappeared. Now I want to move to Paris, and I was curious to how I could push this camera in not making it a very formal, very, very scheduled. I wanted to take it to a situation where it was unpredictable and I didn't have as much control. And I decided to take this camera to Paris. 40 pounds worth of camera and gear, and take it to the streets of Paris. I used a backpack and it got a little heavy, so I bought a little dolly that I took in the streets of Paris. And at first, I loved the Parisian metro, and I used the metro a lot at the beginning. However, the metro has a lot of stairs. It's underground. So I had to go up the stairs, down the stairs, and most of them don't have an escalator or an elevator. And then my friend encouraged me to take the bus. And I used the bus from then on because I could just hop on and explore. And these pictures, what they taught me is that this camera, like @J, who is a photographer and he photographed Paris, I am able to push the boundaries a little bit by taking these moments, these slices of life of Paris. Again, I'm interested in how people are using the space and making it their own. So this is from Arène de Lutèce, which is one of the oldest parts of Paris, with these two children talking. They were talking there for a little bit because they did not move as I took the picture.
They did know you were there.
They knew I was there. Because that's a great question, because this camera is so visible, and I can't take a coat and hide it. It's very visible. What I discovered was that this camera is so friendly because I am not sneaking a picture. I'm out in the open. I'm advertising that I'm doing something different. And people were curious. People approached me and asked, "What are you doing? What are you photographing? How old is your camera? Why are you using this camera?" And it was a lot of fun. Knowing the language, knowing French really helped with that, but it was a great experience, and From these pictures, I think that one could argue that they were taken with a normal camera, with a normal digital camera, a portable, smaller camera. And I think that is what is surprising. What I was very surprised about is that these pictures aren't the normal way of shooting. I am taking it to a location and grabbing slices of life as it unfolds. I'm not directing. I'm not saying, could you move this way just a little tad bit, move back, move forward? Could you show up at this certain moment? And how I worked was very much like hunting. I'd walk around and I'd see a picture, I'd get my camera. It took about 10 minutes to set up, and then I waited. I waited for the right moment. I waited for people to go to frame or to do something, and it was really fun. What I like about this picture, one of my favorite spots, is this little pigeon. I think it captures Paris quite well with Ile Saint-Louis. People, or a couple, or two people having lunch next to the river with a pigeon nearby. Jardin Luxembourg. Eiffel Tower, of course. And most of these images were one-offs, meaning I only took one photo for each of them. For each photo, I took one photo. And the reason why that is important, or why it's significant, is that I could only carry 6 sheets of film on me, because I only brought 3 film holders. And a film holder is a contraption where it keeps the film in a dark spot until I need to press the button and take the picture. So I could only take 6 pictures. And if I were in another part of town, the place where I'm staying would be in a different part of town, and getting to that would take a long time. And I'm showing you these pictures because it really illustrates my journey with this camera. And it illustrates where I'm going toward. And so this is Parc Butte-Chaumont in Paris. Again, people in their environment. And I always am curious to what they're talking about, what they're thinking, and what's going on. That to me is what I'm always curious of when I see people and photograph people. I like to be that fly on the wall. And I think that becomes sort of my my journalism training. And Parc Monceau. And 2 images from one one from Pont Alexandre and the other is Pont Invalide with the Eiffel Tower in the background. Montmartre and Porte de Saint-Denis. This is sort of my homage to Atget. And then last but not least, Notre-Dame de Paris. This is one of my favorite images from the series. And the reason is, of course, Notre-Dame, after this was in 2017. After this was taken, Notre-Dame burned, of course. And this beautiful structure is being rebuilt. And this was one picture. I only had one image left, and I remember setting it up. I did ask these people, I'm going to take a picture, is that okay? And they said, yeah, no worries. And I was there for a long time. And I waited and waited and waited until the right moment. And it's really funny because sometimes when I take these pictures, sometimes I close my eyes and I, press the button, close my eyes and hope that everything lines up and we make a beautiful picture. I think this illustrates real well how images can be so powerful and fleeting, because sometimes you capture a moment and the significance you don't know until later. So we're going to come back to America and talk about my new process that I'm doing. And this is wet plate collodion. It's a process developed in the mid-1800s. And you might know them, you've seen them for sure. These are images made around the Civil War era. And the wet plate process was developed using collodion. Collodion is this substance that is very, very sticky, and it was used in the medical field to dress wounds because it's very sticky and it's sterile. So they used it with the medical field, and somebody saw how sticky it was and decided to add a few chemicals in it. And once you dip it to a bath of silver nitrate, becomes light sensitive, and then you are able to make a picture by developing it and then fixing it right after. So you are familiar with these pictures. To the right is an image of Matthew Brady's photograph outfit. And you have a similar camera, a box camera that is used like mine, and a dark room that's portable. Here's a dark room, or a portable dark room, horse-drawn carriage, portable dark room. And let me so you've seen them before. So to the left is Private Thomas and an unknown soldier to the right. Oops. An unidentified girl in a morning dress holding a framed photograph of her father as a cavalryman with a sword and hardy hat. Portrait of two young African American women, one standing, one seated, and unidentified man. So you've seen these pictures before. And the reason why I am exploring collodion, I blame it all on my professor and my mentor and friend, Charles Mason. He has been doing collodion in Denali for a long time, since 2018, 2017. And he recently did a show at the Anchorage Museum on his work, his body of work in Denali, using this same process. And for the longest time, I've always said, I'm not interested in collodion. It's a long process, it's messy, it's unpredictable, it's, a little dangerous, has chemicals in it. Film is the opposite. It's light. I don't need a bunch of stuff to make a picture. And I know when I take out a piece of film, it will act like any piece of the film. It's predictable, et cetera, et cetera. And as you have seen with my pictures of Paris, it came out perfect. Well, perfect. As perfect as it could be. And there are ways of making mistakes with film, but with collodion it's a whole different process. But I've seen some of these pictures with Denali using collodion and really, really fell in love with his images, of course, were phenomenal. It's a different way of photographing, and the images are different. As he was putting his show together at the Anchorage Museum, he asked me if I could help him make a video on the process. And this is where my journey begins. He's shown me the pictures, but I never really got to know the process and how it looks like, and a magic that, the magic of collodion that's different to darkroom magic, of watching your image pop up in the red light. And I will show you the video next, but out of his pictures, this image really stuck with me. Again, it's that theme of how people interact with the space and with their environment. And I really, really like this image a lot because Denali National Park, or Denali, the people is what makes this space wonderful, right? I mean, the scenes, of course, are great, but so let's take a look at how the process works. So using a camera, same camera, we put on a lens, of course, and so the image is viewed in the back. It's upside down and reversed, so it's backwards, it's mirrored. It's a little disorienting at first when you're learning to use this camera. So collodion is poured into glass, or if you could stop the video, please. Collodion is poured on a plate. It's either glass or for me, aluminum that has a enamel, a black enamel. And then the plate is then taken into a dark room and is dipped into silver nitrate. So this is what makes the emulsion light sensitive and allows us to capture an image. Exposures are very long, and this process also is UV light sensitive. It's very finicky because UV light, because most photographs aren't tuned to the UV light. They take available light in all spectrums. But collodion, UV light is the light that excites the photons to create an image. And UV light makes it tricky. Go ahead. Oops. You can restart that, please. We use the lens cap as a shutter, and this is wet plate collodion, so it must be developed in the field. And this is one reason why tintypes, amber types were very popular back in the day, because it was very fast and very cheap. And photography, I'll move on later, one sec. So with this process, it was very popular back in the Civil War, because before photography, who had their portraits taken or made? My audience. Aristocracy. People who had the means, people who had power, people who had the money to commission an artist to make their likeness. And an artist, whether it's a painter or a sculptor, in antiquity, it was a sculptor. But photography made that action of making your likeness equal. It's now not just for people with money, power, who can preserve their likeness or their loved one's likeness in perpetuity, but now everybody can do it. And that, I think, is the power of photography. And we're still making portraits. We're still interested in preserving our image for the future, whether we like it or not. It's there. So now we move on to my new portraits, made with this process of wet plate collodion. This is my very first image of people that I don't know. These skaters, these teenagers were at the Benel parking lot skating. And before this, I asked my sister to sit for me. The pictures didn't really come out really well. I photographed the trees a lot to get used to the process. It didn't really work out that well. However, this night, when I asked these kids to sit for me, I asked them, hey, do you have some time? And would you be interested in having your portrait taken? And they agreed. And then I went inside and grabbed my camera, and they were very excited about the camera. And when I developed it, it came out. And again, that excitement is really interesting. These are my very first images as well, with my friend Maureen and Dylan. And there's a reason why they're using, or their heads are backed into the tree. This process is a very long process. So if we switch back to the Civil War pictures, I thought I included a where you could see it, but it didn't make it. Anyway, these people, their heads were strapped to a brace, a neck brace. And this is one reason why you don't see an expression on people's faces. It's because they can't move. Some of these exposures probably were in the minutes or more than 30 seconds, and you can't hold still that long and not move. And you can tell there's a little bit of movement here because it's a lot closer, this one as well, but they are more likely using a neck brace when they're seated. And, oh, you can see it right here. There's a stand. And once you see that stand, it's very difficult to unsee in a lot of these old images. So at the beginning, I use a tree. And it works. This is Trevor and Anya wearing their overalls. Charles, David, and Eric. Again, back of the tree as I was learning. And it's very finicky. What I like about this process is how imperfect it is. And digital is too perfect, I think. And a lot of these images, you have these squiggles and lines, and all of this would be hidden by a border, so you wouldn't see it. Back in the Civil War era. But I really just enjoy all the imperfections that this process makes. And it goes back to my first portraits and how formal they are. It's the image of the person. They're not active. They're not moving. They're sitting, looking at you. And I think that's what I like the most about these images and seeing these images. Because one could create a story behind every picture. And when I see them, the old Civil War pictures, not these two, I'm often wondering, what's their story? Who are they? And I'm curious to know what they did and what they're doing now, or if they... This is Michael, he's a violinist. When he brought his violin when I photographed him, and I said, hey, I asked, hey, you could actually play the Civil War theme by Ash Cohen Farewell that Ken Burns used in his documentary. And he did. It was actually really fun. Summer and her family. I like the movement. I like that it's not sharp. People's expressions are a lot more stern, stoic. And it's surprising because it's different. That's what I like about it. This is Victoria, Leif and Caitlin. And lastly, that's my last picture. So thank you very much for being here today. If you are in the audience, you are welcome. I brought a plate that you could take a look at. Let me pass this around. And you're welcome to handle it. So.
Does anybody have any questions? Thank you. Thank you so much, Gerald. That was amazing.
Thank you.
I have a quick question. When we saw the process that Charles walked on, he was photographing the cliff with all the tags, and the tags didn't make it on the picture. Is that the same than with facial tattoos? They don't make it to the final product?
Yes, because the ink on the cliff, it isn't excited with UV light, or UV light doesn't reflect that pigment, so it comes out as blank. There's actually a body of work by a photographer who photographed Maori people with facial tattoos, and I'm not sure, I can't remember the photographer at the top of my head at the moment, but I really, really enjoyed their approach to this body of work, because they utilized that to their benefit. So in the collodion pictures, they were dressed in Western clothing. And in the digital pictures where the facial tattoos showed up, it was with their traditional regalia. So yes, that is absolutely correct. The UV light is finicky. Any other questions, or do we have any questions online? Yes.
I was curious about the process of developing a plate, something you've got on glass with 2 layers of different chemicals. Then how does the image goes on paper, the image goes on metal, the image goes on where?
The image goes onto that collodion. So imagine that collodion is the substrate. That's the place where it becomes light sensitive. So if it were on glass, it would actually be a negative, and you could see through it. Because I'm using metal that's been enameled with a black enamel, it becomes a direct positive image. So the image is projected to that plate, and that's how you see the image. It's a direct positive.
Oh, so it goes directly on
It
the
goes
plate.
directly on the plate. And it's a unique picture. That's what I forgot to mention. It's a unique picture. And it could only be replicated by photographing or scanning. But I call it an NFT. It's like an NFT. non-fungible tin type.
Elvira, did you see this?
Yes.
Did-
Has the affordability lasted span the years, or is it hard to find the materials to do this?
The materials, there's actually a resurgence of wet plate collodion, and so, yeah, the materials are there, the raw materials are there. The medical industry continues to use collodion, I think. Most of you probably have used collodion in the past. If you've used liquid Band-Aids, that yellow sticky substance that if you have a cut, you take with the brush and you brush it on, that's collodion. And it's sticky, and if it dries, it becomes this really flaky thing. That's collodion. And we still use it today. So yes, the materials you can still find. The things that are harder to find, I guess, would be the neck brace.
Camera?
The cameras are there. There are plenty of cameras that have survived, and I use a modern lens. This camera actually is from the 1950s, and once we're finished here, I'll focus it, and you're welcome to peek and see how it works. It's really, really interesting to use. And what is different from film and paper is that it's an instant process. And once the image is there, once it's developed and is fixed, as long as it's washed, we add a lacquer to it, a shellac or a varnish, and it should, if done correctly, it should last a very, very long time.
So it's like the first Polaroid.
First Polaroid, exactly, was in the mid 1800s, and theoretically, Charles, my mentor and professor, equated it to, it's like digital. Because if I have a plate that I'm not happy with, or a glass plate, or a tin plate, theoretically, you could scrape off the emulsion and start over. And they figured this out a long time ago, which is really cool. And how with the video, we didn't really capture that, but the moment when the image is fixed is magic. It goes from a negative to a positive, and to view that in person is magic. It's alchemy, and that's one reason why I love this process, is that you're taking raw materials, you're mixing them together, you make a picture, and it's magic. It's so different than digital, and how perfect it is. And yeah, there's a sense of magic to the process. Unlike film, there's magic in film too, but this it's more instant.
Any other questions?
Do we have questions online? Okay, great.
All right, that is incredible.
Thank you again. Thank you.